The broadcast is live.
I really hope people get in early on this one because you guys are in for a good show. You know, so we have a secret weapon here of Jared.
Yeah. I've been through this.
Yeah, we went through this at Marvel in the 90s. And we discussed a little bit there, try to make sure that we don't go off the rails in this show today.
And I know how comics are made, so I know the behind the scenes stuff that has to go through to get comics made. So,
all right.
And it's not like any other business. That's you hear about all these outside people coming in, and it is tough. I mean, they don't know. Comics are such a distinct business that when you come from the outside in, and you're one of the people in charge of comics, often they have no clue what they're doing.
Right.
It's just hard.
Okay.
Which is why I said on one of the IMs we had on this week, we'll be seeing a lot of vice presidents moving in and out of DC over the next 2 years.
There we go. So for people in the future that may be running across this, it is August 14th, 2020. And on August 11th came the huge DC layoffs as a result of AT&T buying out and Warner. And can we just go ahead and say it's a move to get out of debt? Is that what we're agreeing on?
Okay. You hear all sorts of rumors about this and this, but it's always debt.
Right.
Like I actually looked it up, and AT&T, after they bought Warner's, their total debt load was $180 billion, which means they have to service that debt. So the first thing we've all seen, what was that? That movie from the 80s with Michael Douglas?
Oh, Wall Street or something?
Was it Wall? It was Wall Street, right?
Yeah.
They move in, they take over a company, they sell off the profitable parts, and all the guys up top make money. And that's when they bought AT&T. And ideally, you're supposed to be able to pay off your debt with the profits from whatever company you bought.
Yeah.
But most of these guys, they're so leveraged that the profits aren't enough.
Okay. The thing I looked up said that AT&T bought Warner Brothers in October 2016, but you saw something that said 2018, right?
I read it was a report. I think it said from 2018 from AT&T because I just Googled AT&T and their debt.
Okay.
And so there's it was actually on AT&T's website, one of their reporting things that said that recapped them buying Warner Brothers, and that it was like AT&T's debt and Warner Brothers, and they had their total debt after buying it. It was $180 billion. It was just like, whoa.
Yeah. And the biggest thing here is that this isn't just a thing they're doing with DC. They are going to live streaming. They're going over the HBO Max, all their streaming apps. DC Direct is gone. That made the collectibles, and they're this is like everything. And we're focusing on DC. You know what I'm saying? The comic book part, right? And they ended up laying off editor-in-chief Bob Harris. Who else they got here? The executive editor of Black Label, Mark Doyle, vice president Global Publishing, Bobby Chase. Other people like Brian Cunningham, Andy Curry. A lot of these names, if you just read the text in a comic book or something, you know what I mean? Like go down the line.
Bob Harris was, of course, the 90s editor-in-chief for Marvel. Bobby Chase was a group editor at Marvel in the 90s.
Now, here's a question I want to have. Now, due to work, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, everybody around here is miserable. And everybody in my part in Virginia, where I'm at, everybody is miserable at work and stuff. So I haven't had to get any updates since Wednesday and stuff. Just but was Bob Harris not the editor-in-chief when Marvel went bankrupt? Am I remembering right?
Yeah, he was. I think he was. Yeah. It was Tom DeFalco and then Bob Harris. I can't remember the exact. It was around that era because I think Marvel didn't officially go bankrupt until '96, and I think Bob Harris was the editor-in-chief by then. But it had nothing to do with him. Once again, that had to do with if you read the book. Anybody who wants to learn, there was a book about Marvel's bankruptcy that's great called Comic Wars that came out in the '90s.
Okay,
and it is just. It's like reading. It's a financial book, but it reads more like a thriller.
Okay. Well, let's back up there, and then like we can start like getting back to our normal format and stuff. So we got the layoffs. Those are the people that are laid off. You were there in the 90s.
Right.
When what happened? Just go ahead and you were there. Go ahead.
Well, what happened was that was called Marvolution at the time. It was, like I said, Marvel. I don't think Marvel was in bankruptcy yet. I can't remember if they were or not, but they had to have mass firings, because what happened was the owner of Marvel, Ron Perlman, the billionaire, not the actor, ended up, and this is all written in this Comic Wars book, that Marvel ended up buying a whole bunch of companies. They bought Fleer, Skybox. They bought another baseball card company. They bought Panini stickers. They went on a spending spree, and all the big wigs got tons of money from this. But I mean, they bought like Fleer Skybox for, I think the number was like 125 million after the baseball card market crashed too. It was like everybody was like, they did what? So now they had to service all this debt, but they didn't have the income to service all this debt anymore, because all the stuff they bought stopped making money. See, so Marvel's comics were actually still making a profit, but all the other stuff they bought wasn't.
See, Marvel's legal started making me, and this will all lead up to the DC layoffs, so everybody will know. But the Marvel legal team, from my viewpoint, a guy in my 20s reading about this stuff here in Wizard and whatnot and editorials and stuff, they started buying up competition. They bought Malibu because they were publishing books, and after Image broke off from them, they got
it turned out years later, because they told us at the time that they bought Malibu because they wanted their coloring department, which we were baffled by, because their coloring department was just some 20-year-olds on Photoshop, and we knew that.
Well, the guys in my comic book shops, we never fell for that. We were like, bullshit. I mean, whether it was true or not, whatever. But the other thing was it turned
out years later, we found out that they bought them because DC was looking into buying them. And it would have made DC's market share closer to Marvel. So Marvel just said, forget that. We're going to buy them.
There we go. And then Defiant, they came up with a book called Plasma X, Plasma or something like that. And Defiant had to change their first book to come out to Warriors of Plasma. It was just called Plasma.
Right. Because Marvel sued them, right?
Marvel sued, lost, but it took up all the it emptied the bank accounts of Defiant, and they went out. So we did, us talking like where everybody's doing now about the DC layoff. I mean, I feel like I'm repeating history on some of the stuff. Is that we knew it wasn't the guys making the comics and editing and stuff. There's a whole other branch on there, so we were smart enough to know that. But they were looking evil. And when they went bankrupt, it was like this weird sort of karma that we thought hit, which is what a lot of people, including me to a certain extent, are coming off with what happened here with the DC layoffs and stuff. You follow me?
Right. Okay. What happened at Marvel was everybody kind of knew layoffs were coming because things were bad.
Right.
And then just one Friday, there started being phone calls. You'd be down in wherever you were, editorial bullpen, whichever. We were all on the 10th floor. There was a long row, editorial row, where all the editors had their office, and the bullpen was in the middle of this big open area. And all of a sudden, one of the phones would ring, or you'd see, and you'd be being called up to HR, and you knew you were being fired.
Gotcha.
And it's like all of a sudden you see an editor coming out of their office, shaking their head. They'd be like, they're heading up to 80. And it was just, work just stopped. And everybody was sitting around waiting for the phone to ring to see who was next.
Right.
And that's the same thing that happened at DC, except everybody was home. Could you imagine?
The other thing is that if you think back a couple months ago when they got rid of Dan Didio, and that's where a lot of people speculating. Right. Saul was saying something else is coming, whether that's true or not, it maybe it's a weird timing. But what got me is that he was escorted out. He was not.
Oh, that's how it happens. Yeah.
Right.
When you get fired these days, you get escorted. It doesn't matter who you are.
Right.
But it didn't happen at Marvel that day because they didn't have enough security guards to escort anybody out.
Right.
And they fired, 30 people. So it wasn't like they had 30 security guards. But later on under Ike, because Ike was nuts. He still is, of course. But he used to fire people every Christmas. And he used to have, there were some people who we went out to, he'd fire people at lunchtime. So we, like my one friend, I saw him, Johnny Green, worked at Marvel with him for 10 years, came back from lunch, he was just gone. They fired him and escorted him out. It was like, not even a chance to say goodbye.
In my job where I end up working with other companies across the state, we'll just put this phone over here. We're not going to have that do that. But I've actually worked with another case manager for a client up around Richmond, about 5 hours from my office. And we made 2-3 calls, 8:30, 9:30. Okay, I've done this 11. And then I called at 1 o'clock and they'd been fired. So I've seen all that stuff. On a Friday in the middle of working on a case.
Right. And this happened 3 times at Marvel during their bankruptcy over like a 1.5-year period or something. It was crazy. Like you just sitting around waiting for the phone call to come.
Right.
And like I said, imagine that happened when everyone was at home at DC. Though, and now they're actually still. I just read today. Because California has a law that says if you do this, you have to give the people 60 days notice.
Well, they're saying their jobs are going. That's one of the things I read. Like I said, I haven't seen anything since Tuesday night. Okay, but one of the things they're saying is that these jobs will be irrelevant by December, and that was the word I saw.
They said DC gave them 90 days notice before they're at the end of their jobs.
But I did see this morning that some letterer put out.
He's the head of the lettering department saying he's put out a letter that said, still send your stuff in to me until October. It's business as usual.
There we go. Yeah.
So it's business as usual until October.
Okay. Well, my thing is that I want to talk about the business plan I saw in the article that I had down here, right? What they were saying about. Now, I think you sent a message out. Paulo, jump in here, man. Just jump in here anytime, man.
My message was there's no business plan. Trust me, there's no plan.
It's not so much a business plan. It's what's being put out by like the Grace Randolph and a few other people. Mm-hmm. But what's wild about it is that it's what's people been. I think the reason it's gained steam is that it's the way people have been expecting things to happen to begin with in the digital age.
Yeah.
All right. So the whole thing is that what I've seen across the board that I believe is that they're going for the streaming. All right. They're going to go for the streaming. Everything's getting here and there with it. And so the one thing about it is that I see floppies going away eventually. They're going for the bookstores. They don't care about the comic book shops. I mean,
that's gonna kill them.
Even the bookstores are not that important. The things, I don't think they see publishing at all as viable. Although I've seen some people speculate that they're going to try to focus on the young adult market and try to do those silly novels that kids supposedly read.
They brought up the people who make those young novels over what the young adult stuff into.
But I see that they're definitely. I see this is more. The only thing there that matters is the characters, and even then they're not going to be mining the library. They're going to stick with what's known. It's going to be Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Justice League, maybe Teen Titans. We're not going to see anything with the Legion, with Jonah Hex, with the Vertigo properties.
I have a better answer for one of Paolo's questions from last week when we were talking. At the end of last week's show, when we were talking about Marvel, and Paolo said, "Why don't we just stop talking about Marvel?" And I was like, because it's interesting. Actually, a better answer, I think, would be because we here in the United States are facing an extinction level event with grown-up adult comics in a way like that Europe or Japan isn't. We're really facing, if Marvel or DC go down and the comic shops go down, everyone keeps saying how well the children's stuff is doing in the bookstore market, which is fine. But that's all that'll be left.
Yeah.
Once again, we'll be back 40 years with no comics for adults, and we'll be the only part of the world like that.
Okay, then we're okay.
But anyway, that was answering Paolo's question, throwaway question from the end of last week.
It's going to be on the readers to decide if they want to diversify their tastes, because I see constantly videos of people buying who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s. The only thing that they're excited about is superhero comics. The new Marvels, the new DCs, all of the variants. Character X is coming back. Character Y is going to have an event. They don't say, "Oh man, I picked up." It's very rare that somebody gets that new graphic novel by Brubaker, Pulp, and says, "Wow, this is the best comic I've read all year." That's when that happens. That's rare, and people, the fans themselves.
If Marvel and DC go down, there's a good chance we won't even get those Brubaker graphic novels anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So it's going to have to be the readers that they have to make that decision. Otherwise, the comic shops are definitely gonna disappear. Right. It's the readers who are going to have to decide if they like the comics because they like the subject matter of superheroes, who until 20 years ago could not exist outside the comic book.
I'm just saying that's what they're going to decide. I mean, you're giving them a choice here. I think they've already made the choice. If Marvel and DC go down, they're not going to go to comic shops or stores looking for Brubaker novels. That's what worries me, because I want the Brubaker novels. I don't read Marvel or DC much, but I still want them to exist because they have to exist in order for me to get the Brubaker and Sean Phillips novels.
Yeah,
right.
So it's kind of like,
and that's the problem. The industry,
and that's distinctly over here in the United States. That's not a problem in Japan or in Europe, but over here in the United States, that's our reality.
Yeah, like last week, I gave you some numbers of the French market, and they have the top selling comics at 500,000 for their own.
Wait a minute. Wait. We're referring to Cavern of Chaos episode 18. Continue.
But what's more, the main comic book publisher in France, actually, the 3 of the 4 main comic book publishers in France belong to the same company, compete with each other, and contribute with publishing to 30% of the parent company's revenue.
Right.
Marvel.
One of the problems
as a publisher doesn't.
Oh yeah, one of the problems I've always said with Marvel and DC is they're not actually publishers. They're more like IP factory. They're, the IP is more, the intellectual property is more important than the publishing.
Yeah.
So that's a problem. That's a problem. That's like, I don't think that's the characters. Yeah.
Now, to kind of back up a little bit here and stuff, right? I still feel like the floppies are going to go. I really do. I think it's all going to be like digital.
If they do, it'll be a real problem.
Yeah, but the thing is that I think it's the death of the comic book shop, because you've always sort of known the numbers. 30% of that's 30% of their what they sell. In a comic book shop. I can't believe I just went blank on the word I wanted now, but and they don't care, and that's what I'm saying. And they're looking at it business wise now.
If the floppies go and the comic book shops go, the American comic book market is in big trouble, and I don't know what it's going to look like. It might just be children's book publishing. And I think they're going to start mining all the old stories that we already have on our shelves, and it's going to be trade after trade of the old stuff, which may be why
one of the things that they said in that plan was that they were going to stick to what sold. So if something is collected, it will keep being and keep selling. It will be available. New stuff, Watchmen will be available. But if the series has never been collected, they're not going to collect it ever again. So if you're waiting.
They got rid of what's his name, Scott Nybakken, who I don't know, but he's a friend of a friend, who for 25 years has been in charge of their collected editions.
There you go.
And they just got rid of him. So.
Yeah.
But since he was there so long, he had one of the bigger salaries. So I imagine that's why they let him go too. Because a lot of times, like I said, I can tell you right now, there's no plan And when the rubber hits the road, any plan they have will have to be changed. And here's the problem I see with things as they stand. And right now, and they just announced that there's going to be co-editor-in-chiefs, Marie Javins and Michelle. So here's the quote I just quoted to some of my friends. There was an article that
I got the names. I got the names, man. Marie Javins, Pamela Lifford, and Nancy Spears, maybe.
Michelle, somebody here. Michelle Wells.
Michelle Wells, right here.
Marie Javins and Michelle Wells are editor-in-chiefs at DC. And here's the two quotes I want to read.
Lifford was the president, yeah.
Michelle has a reputation for scheduling work long into the future, so deadlines are less of an issue. Marie Javins also has a reputation for getting things done on deadline against impossible odds. Now, that's the difference between book publishing and comics. And people in book publishing don't know that.
There we go.
Marie Javins, my quote I posted on Facebook was, Marie Javins is going to have to do all the grunt work of getting the monthly comics out on time. And Michelle Wells is going to be taking long lunches with clients. The difference between book publishing and comic book publishing is deadlines.
Yeah.
When you're publishing a comic book, you've got a deadline for the plot/script, a deadline for the pencils, a deadline for the inks, a deadline for the finished script, a deadline for the letters, a deadline for the colors, and a final drop-dead deadline for the printing of the comic. That's 7 deadlines per comic book issue that you're juggling. There's no other business like that. When you work in book publishing, you've got deadlines way out into the. You got the author has to write it, and his deadline. His deadline is a year in the future.
As I was going to say,
that year, you got your book designer working on the cover. Maybe you got an illustrator working on the cover, and deadlines are lackadaisical.
Yeah, I've read enough little editorials and interviews with writers and stuff where they talk about they had a year, to do the first draft, second draft, and finished one. But oh man, so yeah, that's the biggest difference because I was going to get into how's the workplace going to change, and that I think that kind of gives you an idea.
It's going to be in that. The problem is that Michelle Wells will have no clue what I've seen this before. Comics are so specific, and also the Pamela somebody who's in charge of those two who comes out of licensing.
Pamela Lifford.
Licensing is like when you hear them say we're going to concentrate on our best-selling stuff, that's a licensing mindset because licensing is easy. Making Batman into a character who survived the test of time is really, really hard. That takes a lot of creative people making a lot of comic books that a lot of people want to read for a long time.
Yeah.
Making a licensing Batman is a snap. You put him on a backpack and all the people who love Batman are already there. And they buy Batman backpacks.
Found at Hobby Lobby.
There you go.
Off, yes.
So when you come out of licensing, life is a breeze. You just look over at DC Comics and you see which are their best-selling comics, and you make license and people come to you when you're a licensor. Someone comes to you with an idea. A backpack maker comes to you with an idea, saying, "Hey, we really want to put Superman on our backpack," and you go, "That'll be $100," and you collect the money. But making Superman is tough. So yeah, Marie Javins, she was one of the first people to hire Warren Ellis. I think she was the first person in mainstream comics to hire Warren Ellis. She's been making comics since the late 80s. She worked at Marvel. Well, I think she was one of the ones. I don't know. I think she left during the bankruptcy, but I don't think she got fired. She was also a freelance colorist then.
Yeah.
So she actually did freelance coloring, and I would, and then she moved on after, and I think she lost her freelance coloring at some point when things went digital or whatever. And she actually was the editor-in-chief of Tashkil Comics, which was a Kuwaiti-run comic book company. So she did that for a few years, and then when DC moved to Burbank, Bob Harris, her old boss, called her up and said, "We need someone to stay in New York and run." There was a crossover event that happened when they were all moving to Burbank. I can't remember. Convergence. And so that was she stayed in New York and ran Convergence while everybody else was moving to Burbank.
Convergence was their answer to the 3-month gap they needed to move.
Right.
So they could still be. They were awful.
And I 100% knew she was going to move to Burbank and continue on with DC at that point, because she wasn't planning on moving to Burbank, and I was like, I IM'd her. I was like, Marie, I know you're moving to Burbank. They throw enough money at you, you're going to move to Burbank. And also, like I said, Bob Harris liked Marie.
Yeah,
he worked with her all those years. She's reliable. She's good at her job. So I knew that, Bob Harris, the newly installed editor-in-chief back then, wasn't going to let her go if he didn't have to.
Right.
And sure enough, she's been there all these years, and like I said, she's just kind of the last person. She was also one of these people who wasn't. She wasn't kind of ego-driven. She just kind of did the work. She was always kind of off to the side doing the work.
Professional.
Right. Professional, off to the side doing the work. So, and that's how you could rely on her to do the work. So now that's why I'm like, when I saw this, I'm like, oh, she's gonna. The other woman who's from publishing isn't gonna be. She's not gonna be in the day-to-day comic deadline stuff. I just know it.
See, and that's what I think they're really shooting for structurally. That's coming up. We don't have a crystal ball.
Oh yeah.
I think it's going to be a much more professional environment. Is what they're going to expect.
No, DC was always professional. DC was way more
professional than Marvel. I mean, just more.
Much more. Marvel was always seat of your pants.
Yeah.
Marvel always had fewer people working there than was ideal. DC always had 20% more people than was ideal. That's why DC could get rid of so many people, because they had so many people. They were much more corporate.
Now, DC had that reputation for decades, because you would hear people saying it was suits, it was tie and a white shirt when he went to work, and they'd go to Marvel and they'd be like, hippies were sleeping under the desks.
Right. Marvel became much more corporate after Ike took. Like, by the time I left in 2005, it was much, much more corporate than it ever was in the 90s, but still not as corporate as DC. Like, DC was all about systems, and I worked at DC for 2 days and 20 minutes once.
Yeah, I love that.
And like I said, nobody talked. It was so weird. Nobody talked to each other. Like at Marvel, when I worked there, and this was still the case, and I'm working in the bullpen. I'm basically working with editors. I walk into the editor's office and hand them stuff, and they tell me this and do this. At DC, you didn't do that. The editors were on a different floor. You handed something to your boss. And only your boss went and talked to them, and then he came back, and like the whole system was designed so people didn't have. So 2 specific people didn't have to talk to each other. I don't remember who they are. I wasn't there then, but I was told that this whole crazy system. So it's like DC had 1.5 people for everybody who was needed to do the jobs, or something like that, or 1.25 people. Marvel had 3/4 of a person for everybody who was needed to do the job.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's why Marvel's deadlines were always we were getting books out the day they needed to make it to the printer. There was DC, supposedly the books were 2 and 3 months ahead. Marvel's books were right on that deadline.
Sounds like my newspaper.
Yeah. Well, a newspaper's kind of got to be that way, but comic books not necessarily.
Yeah,
but like
my newspaper was my newspaper was one of my old boss used to say that we were a daily that came out once a week because all the racing is on the weekend. So we did 2/3 of a 40-page newspaper on a Sunday to come out on a Monday.
Like the problem I see with DC going forward is once again people who don't know comics are in charge.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know Marie's there and she knows comics, but I just know all the day-to-day stuff is going to be left to her because she knows comics.
Yeah.
All the stuff. People who do licensing and book publishing don't know comics. And they don't know. One of the things about comics is you have to make a lot of comics for a long time to get a hit comic.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if they're going to have the patience for that anymore. I don't think the companies have had the patience for that for the last 10 years.
See, what I'm worried about, not worried. One of the things I'm kind of concerned is I can make a comparison back in wrestling days, and there's we know wrestling, we know who Ric Flair is. One of the reasons Ric Flair ended up cutting his hair is because they brought in a guy who was the executive chief, whatever, big CEO of Pizza Hut, and they brought him over to the wrestling thing. Mm-hmm. They mentioned that they're going to bring in as somebody to kind of be the boss there, I guess, at Marvel from esports. Okay.
Oh yeah, DC, right? Yeah,
yeah.
What that is they want to bring in someone successful.
They've already ran one company. They feel successful. I mean, I'm worried in my area. I mean,
comics. That's the problem. Comics is so specific and takes such patience that and I saw this at Marvel too. These guys are going to be cycling through because it's a stepping stone. It's going to become a stepping stone position because nobody wants to be the guy running the least profitable. You want to be running esports. You want to be running streaming. You want to be running movie companies. That's where all the big profit and glory is.
And that's what I'm trying to say. This is what it's coming across. I mean, we're leading right toward the point I'm trying to kind of speculate on. More professional work area environment than even what you say DC is. Bringing in somebody to run it more like a company, and they don't know comics.
Yeah.
This is going to. I'm telling you, the stuff like what Tom King's pulled, what these people have pulled on like Twitter and stuff, isn't going to float. It's not going to float at all.
I don't think they'll care. I don't think they'll care one way or another. They won't know enough about comics. No, they won't pay attention to that in the least.
It's not
in the least.
But it's not so much about comics. It's about keeping the face of the company. Not to have a blemish on it. They have stockholders. They have stockholders.
Do you think that the guy who's making $500,000 running DC Comics or however much, I don't even know how much, it's going to be a big paycheck, running DC Comics, who's got his eye on the next job, cares what a couple hundred people complaining on Twitter say? Not in the league.
But would a guy from esports coming over from there care?
Not in the least.
I don't know. I think it's not what people say; it's what their employees are saying, and that's how they're going to look at them.
They don't care. They don't even know it exists. Do you think the guy running EA Sports cared about Gamergate? He didn't care in the least. I can guarantee. I don't even know who it is. I barely know what Gamergate was. I can tell you that guy didn't care in the least.
I'm so glad you said that because I didn't want to be a smart ass going, I didn't follow Gamergate. I don't know.
I don't even know what it is, but I know that guy didn't care about it. He didn't care in the least. These guys are so far above that stuff. When you're, imagine if you were in your job and you were clearing $500,000 a year. Would you care what some people on Twitter were saying? And you were eyeballing the $1 million a year job. That's somewhere else.
Well, see, that's the problem. Our Facebooks are monitored. There are businesses that
your immediate boss might care. His immediate boss might care. But the 10th immediate boss up there don't give a crap.
I just kind of feel like where it's such a big corporation like AT&T getting into this stuff. They've spent years planning this stuff.
They do. Do you think the guy in charge of financing $180 billion debt cares what Tom King says on Twitter if he pisses off a couple hundred people? He doesn't care.
Well, here's the thing. AT&T, I can't see them if they're running everything across the board and trying to get everything straight. They're not going to want this crap that came up with Eddie Bergens and stuff. They even like.
They don't. I'm sure they don't want it, but they don't care.
Okay.
They'll hopefully some underling will take care of that stuff. But
the only issue with Eddie Bergenza was if there was any sort of criminal liability that they would have to answer for.
This is what I'm getting at. Yeah, slander, liability, the sexual allegations. Yeah.
There might be some people in the hierarchy who care, but it's not going to be the boss. He doesn't care.
Yeah. It's ultimately it's going to go down to 3 levels above who's in charge of DC and tell him that division over there, fix it.
Okay, I can go with that. Like, if it does become an issue, they've already got people that's going to wipe that out before it gets all the way up the ladder.
Yeah,
they don't want to get the boss. Okay,
but something like pissing off fans on Twitter, they don't. That won't even rise to the level of anything.
Then why are they tweeting now?
Because there's no plan.
Okay.
The marketing department guy doesn't want to lose his job, so it's better to just not do anything than get noticed.
Yeah. I just feel like there's going to be a big I've always talked about a big cultural change comes at every decade, like in the Nirvana hits and all this stuff. So after the way comics have been going for the last few years, my whole point is with them like coming after you on the social media, and we've talked about it. We all know what we're talking about. I wonder if this is going to change things anyway. That's my whole point. Not saying it's going to change. I'm just curious to see. I can't imagine a big company letting some of these things go on. I can't.
They don't get. That's so low. Twitter is so less powerful than people on Twitter think.
Well, okay, that's a whole. That's a conversation people in the world have. Is like, how do people think this is the real world? Why do certain companies actually listen to people on Twitter?
Well, some certain companies do because they have people to pay attention to that, and there are people who respond to little Twitter stuff. But most companies don't, and most time it's like if it doesn't affect if they can't see how it affects their bottom line, they don't bother with it. It's more bother than it's worth.
See,
when you think about it, it doesn't affect its bottom. I mean, there are if comics are so small, what's the average circulation of a comic? That 50,000 people.
It's less than that, yeah.
So if 100 people are mad on Twitter, who's going to care?
But it's a bunch. Well, I mean, now it's going out of the conversation. But it's a bunch of people who don't read comics. They just have that.
I know that's why no one cares. That's a whole why they're mad on Twitter. But I'm just saying, people being mad on Twitter doesn't affect these comic companies that much.
So we get to the actual problem here that we as comic fans have is because we have no way of influencing a company who was $180 billion in debt does not care about a product that only reaches 50,000 people.
Right. There's our problem.
I love how we're on the same.
Which is why we're saying we in the USA here we're always worried about the extinction of our comic book industry because of that. If DC were by itself making money, we wouldn't have to worry about that. But since DC is part of this huge conglomerate that it makes one little tiny fraction of a percentage of their profit, it's like they could be extinguished like that.
Exactly, it's commercial.
If Marvel is going to react, is because if I notice something is to tell if DC can do what they're doing with less money by spending less money, because that's what Ike likes, to spend less money. Right. So people in Marvel,
I don't know that Ike has to look anywhere to be cheaper. I think I think if there's something he can do cheaper, he's on it. He doesn't need examples. Shall we go over some of the comments and see what people are saying?
Yeah, I'm going to go up. I think a lot of people need to just go ahead, even though while they're watching this and all this stuff, you got to check out the comments, man. There's some really good.
Yeah, well, let's go over some of the. Let's go back through the comments.
Yeah, here's Parker Rizzo. Let's do his first one. Let capitalism take its course. Cut amount of titles by 50%. Let the best creators who sell the most stay. Let the rest go sell their politics in a more fitting place than comics.
That's not how creativity works. You can't. The problem with that is you'll never get Wolverine.
The happy accidents. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't get almost every creative thing is an accident when it comes to popular. You wouldn't get Deadpool. Deadpool wasn't popular for years and years and years. You wouldn't get Harley Quinn. She wasn't popular for years and years and years. But you never know what's going to catch on. And you never know which creators. I was just hearing something about someone. It was in the Howard Chaykin book. He said something about Siegel and Schuster being middle of the road creators who had one good creation, which is true. They created the most popular foundation of all comics in this country, Superman, but never really anything else. And you can't. You can't just go by. You have to give things a chance, otherwise they won't have a chance to grow, especially in comics.
See, talking to you, I'm beginning to see where Parker and I kind of come from on some of this stuff, and like people who read the comics where you've been there, and if the company
if they are smart is also a flaw in your reasoning. Most people are not smart. And we think these people who have big jobs are smart. They're not.
Yeah.
They're just not.
It's just that comic books seem to come off to be run different than any company that anybody's had a job and done this. I mean, there's so much ability you spoke of. There's so much. I mean, he's talked about normally the merit and everything like that with Parker. That's how we look at it.
Right.
I would be saying the same thing.
That's the trouble with creative stuff is it doesn't work like everything else.
But what I think we're trying to get at is that with a corporation coming in like AT&T, who's already making the slices and its profit, they've already said they're going to shrink things. It already sounds like they're going that way with it to a certain extent.
Oh, I understand. I understand that if a comic isn't making money, you got to stop publishing that comic. But that doesn't mean you give up on stuff, and you've got to constantly create new stuff in order to get the stuff that's easy to license.
And we're back to where they're not doing that. I mean,
what was that one from Tom Bagley?
Oh, that was Tom Bagley. I was going to comment on what you said. See, that's my problem. I picked up some of that death metal, sort of read it a little bit here and there. I didn't buy it. I might have the first issue, but they basically took the Justice League and turned every character into Batman. They're not creative to begin with now.
I know that was. I've talked about this problem before. I said the Marvel and DC characters we know today will be the James Bond of tomorrow. They're more important pop culture icons thing, right? But you need the new pop culture icons coming up behind them. You need Deadpool. You need Harley Quinn. You need this. You need more than the stuff that's created in the 40s.
What I like to compare this comment to is the Batman, the animated series from the 90s. It's not really about Batman. That's where the Tim Burton movies and the animated series, they were the villains and all the supporting cast were actually in it more than Batman to focus on. We know who Batman is. They're a modern mythology. They're not creating anything to put the heroes around like that. It's my whole point. Yeah.
Was it also, as I've said in past shows, I think the context that the creators are creating in, all the artists and writers, is so corporate that it's tough to create anything other than corporate cookie cutter stuff. Yeah. Marvel had a bullpen, DC had a production department. That was important to selling Marvel. Chuck doesn't even saw 2 editors finishing up cover colors at the same time because the deadline was in 3 hours, and the only concern was that the ink would be wet to mail. That's what happened sometimes. It was crazy.
Nobody had a hair
Jared,
dryer?
you just reminded me of something because if they need to be creating new stuff, we're always too attached to the idea of the shared universe and bringing back the old characters that we loved, which is something that is endemic to comic book creators, especially if they work for Marvel and DC. But in comic book history, the superheroes were gone. There were times when the superheroes were gone. Right. After World War II, they disappeared, and the comic book companies started doing other stuff. Maybe not very interesting, but they did. So, do we really need to, when we think about the characters that DC has, and now they're probably not going to publish, do we really need the Metal Man to come back? Do we need somebody to go over and see if they have a new spin on Legion 89?
No, I don't think we do, but that's the corporate environment in which we exist. I think that's one of the problems. Because the reason that everything keeps coming back is because the corporate environment in which we exist encourages that. Because let's just say you're a creator. You want to create a new comic book. You want to create a new comic book and you want to create your own new superhero. There's her. Do you really want to give that to Marvel or DC? And also, if you do give that to Marvel or DC, there's hurdles you have to jump through. I can remember, I'll tell you a story about when I was there in the early 2000s. If you were creating a new character for Marvel, even an incidental character, and this is back in 2004, 2000, you had to fill out a new creator form, a new character form, sign off on it. Say Marvel owns this character, you get this, they get that, whatever, and that took time. So if you had a deadline coming up and you created a new character, the editor would quite often go, listen, we don't have time for you to create a new character. Find somebody in Marvel history and use them instead. And that happened all the time, just with the incidental characters.
Yeah.
So, and if you were a creator, a freelancer, after a while, you knew that. And you knew that you had a better chance getting your new series through if you revived the Metal Men than if you created all new characters and had to get everybody to sign off on them and you had to lose ownership to them. So the whole corporate system encourages them to keep recycling the characters.
Yeah. I got a comment there, but I'm glad he did this. I didn't want to put his business out. I actually talked to him on Messenger and stuff and everything like that, but he is a business manager of a real Fortune 500 company. Right. And this is why I was sitting here trying to get across without putting his business out there of like, I know exactly where he's coming from.
Right.
Now I've lost my train of thought, but my comment basically was going to have something to do with at comic book conventions where I've talked to, some of the pros there. And I think an article.
Can we just bring that comment up for a second? I just want to say one thing.
Which one? Parker?
The one that Parker just had. Exactly. I'm a business manager. If you see talent in someone, you keep them as an investment. That's what you should do. That's not what happens at comic book companies, especially like the biggest example I'll give of that is Neil Adams. I consider Neil Adams the great failure of comic book companies. Neil Adams, to me, Neil Adams is as if, I always say this, what's his name who made The Godfather? Scorsese, who made The Godfather. Listen, right after Scorsese made The Godfather, Hollywood didn't have any money for him. So he went into directing commercials. So he spent the rest of his career directing commercials instead of making movies. That's what happened to Neil Adams in comics. Yeah. Neil Adams was the greatest comic talent of his generation. Comics didn't have money for him. They didn't see him as an investment. So Neil Adams went off and did commercial artwork where he made a fortune for the rest of his career, and he still dabbles in comics.
See, and it gets
if Neil Adams had worked, if Neil Adams had worked in comics his whole career, he could have been Martin Scorsese of comics, and comics would have made $1 billion off him. But they don't see the talent as talent a lot of times.
Or would he have ended up like Kurt Swan, who did Superman and a few other books for 30 years?
Yeah, exactly.
This is why comic books, when you start exposing it, it starts really not making sense to people, you know.
And I'm telling Parker, I wish these people were smart who were taking over DC Comics, and I wish they could see the talents as investments. But I know they're not going to. That's the problem.
Okay, let's do 2 more comments here, and then mind the comics. Taking current politics, maybe Lars should be the next editors. A year of comic revenue is not worth the cost of a serious legal action against it. We're entering an era of non-true free speech. That's bold.
I don't think that matters to comic book companies. I mean, what matters to comic book companies is that. Did you ever read the Dave Sim story of him doing a DC comic in like 2005?
I don't think so.
Dave Sim, the Cerebus guy.
Yeah.
Some editor wanted him to do a comic. He was all excited. You know, Cerebus was over, and it was just an anthology comic. 8 pages of something. Indie comics doing, and so Dave Sim was like, "Sure, I'll do it," and he got the contract, and Dave Sim is used to working with contracts because he had them all. And there was one point of the contract he wasn't clear on. So he called up his editor and said, "Listen, can you talk to the lawyers and see what this is in this contract?" The editor said, "Okay." He went in and talked to the lawyer, and the lawyer went, "If he doesn't sign the contract, forget it." So you couldn't even question. And that's how comic book you couldn't even question the contract they were giving you because the lawyers didn't want to deal with it. And that's what the lawyers at DC care. They don't care about lawsuits. They care that they own the characters and everything is cleared up in their favor. They don't care what people say on Twitter. They don't care about it. That's not their business. The lawyers care that you sign their contracts and everything's cool then.
Yeah, I got to get back focused to what we're talking about tonight because now I'm sitting here like, how did Sandman end up on Netflix? Does Neil Gaiman have a special contract? I don't know. Now I'm sitting here with other questions about stuff that has nothing to do with
Neil Gaiman doesn't own Sandman because it uses the original name.
I mean, he actually owns Sandman. It wasn't a Jill of.
No, he doesn't own Sandman.
DC owns Sandman, but he got creatorship of Sandman. He didn't get ownership of Sandman, but he is the creator of it. Because originally, Jack Kirby was credited with creating Sandman because he created the original Sandman. But then sometime in the 90s, DC changed that so that Neil Gaiman was the creator of Sandman and got all the money from the TV rights and stuff.
Yeah. It's interesting.
I think there was a sort of unwritten policy that they wanted to keep Neil Gaiman happy enough to just happy enough to keep him to have him around, so and throw him on every once in a while. Yeah. But it's like Electra and Frank Miller. If one editor or one publisher comes around and says, "We have this character, and why aren't we doing anything with it?" We have a mutual respect with the original creator. I don't care. I want this character now, and I want him to sell in the ruse.
Right. DC traditionally also had much better ancillary rights to their. Paul Levitz made sure of that. Once again, he was a comic book guy in charge. That's why guys like Len Wein made more money off of some random background character they created on DC than Wolverine. Yeah. Because if you created a character DC, you got TV and movie money from it.
Jim Starlin got on Facebook and said that I think it was Suicide Squad or one of the DC movies, they had a character in the background. Didn't even have a line that he had created that was there or something. He made more money off of that, off the movie money, than with the Marvel movies.
Yeah, than Thanos. Right. So, and that was all Paul Levitz, from what I'm told. That was what Paul Levitz always made sure that their creators got their money. He would actually track down their checks.
I've got interview after interview. If I dug through some of these wizards and comic scenes, somebody always kinds of mentions the difference between. If they get asked between Marvel and DC, they bring up Paul Levitz. Paul Levitz saw an episode of Smallville and saw a character and immediately got on the phone with Marv and said, "I want to be checking into your check tomorrow for that character being on Smallville."
That's how important it is to have a good comic book guy running the company, as opposed to somebody from licensing or children's publishing. They would never ever do that.
That's what I mean. And we're getting back to this guy from esports they're putting in there who doesn't know comics. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
They're shrinking the comics. They're supposed to be doing the smaller line, just going after like what Paula was saying about the big characters that everybody knows, the big ones. They're going to shrink it. That's less work for creators, less books to send anywhere. And you see my track of what I'm trying to here. It just sounds like it's just going to be less and less, and we're just
that's a licensing idea. That's we're only going to do the most popular stuff. Which is, have you ever heard of Lake Wobegon syndrome?
No, but I'm wondering if these are just keeping the comic books around for commercials for their streaming services and movies.
They might, but that would be the wrong idea. But what Lake Wobegon syndrome is, it comes from a Prairie Home Companion, the Garrison Keillor radio show that was around for 20 years. And one of the lines in every show, Lake Wobegon was a fictional town in, I forget where, somewhere in the Midwest, upper United States. And one of the lines would say, the women are strong, the men good looking, and the children are all above average.
Gotcha.
And they started having something they called Lake Wobegon syndrome in educational testing, because teachers would, like, if there was some standardized test, teachers would teach to the test so that the students would do better on it than they would if they didn't teach to the test. So all the students would be above average, which of course is statistically impossible.
Right.
You can't have all the students above average, because then the average changes. And that's what's happening with this licensing stuff. As soon as you say, we're only going to keep the popular comics, that just changes the range of then the comics that were once middling popular are now unpopular. That's all that does. You can't just keep all the popular comics because it's a scale. It's like, that's not how math works.
Well,
remember when Marvel had that 35,000 sales cutoff, which was and now not if you sell 35,000, you're a hit.
It used to be 100,000. That was the sales cutoff back in the 80s.
Yeah, that's what they're saying.
You always have to have a sales cutoff. Like, I am not saying that anybody should publish comics that aren't making them money.
What Paulo was talking, I want to interpret for just a minute. What Paulo was talking about is comic books were so successful, we'll say the 80s, please, or they published them that much. They were almost all over 100,000 at least printed, right? And then when sales came in, if they were below 35,000, they would go down.
No, the 35,000 was in the late 90s. I think it was after the bankruptcy, because I remember Kurt Busiek or Fabian Nicieza mentioning it in Usenet.
Yeah,
it wasn't a set number because it depended on how much the creative team was making and if there was advertising. But it was usually around 35. But that was in the late 90s. 100,000 was a cutoff in the 80s for sales, and they had newsstand distribution then.
Right.
Yeah.
And also keep in mind, you know what comics were poor sellers? Jim Starlin's Captain Marvel, Jim Starlin's Warlock. Who came out of that? Thanos.
Well, that's the magic of comics. That's the part they don't understand.
That's the part they don't understand.
Yeah, and you'll never get them to understand. I 40 years trying to explain some of this to people. The only thing they hear is when I say how much a book is worth, not how it got there or it was crappy back then.
Right.
I'm always, good God, man, Sweet Tooth is worth $40 to $100 right now because they announced something with Netflix on it.
Right.
Sweet Tooth,
and I don't blame them for canceling Warlock in the 70s because the sales were low, but they kept Jim Starlin around. They finished the story in a couple of annuals. And they brought him back eventually because they knew he was a good villain.
Awesome, man. Man, I don't know. I wish there's just some way we could like bottom on like what does everybody think? Like we're trying to think what that old news show was where the guy would be sitting there, he'd ask a question, look the other way, and point at somebody over here. You know, like and you
like I said, the only one I have faith in this whole DC Comics thing is Marie Javins, because I know she's an old school comic book editor who can get comics out.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're gonna put her in charge of any kind of plan.
Yeah.
It's, the people above her are going to be in charge of the plan, and the plan is going to be constantly changing, and the plan is going to be, I don't know if it's going to be any good, because the plan is going to be coming from people who aren't comic book people, who don't understand what we're saying is that when you're doing comic books, you got to throw a lot of stuff against the wall, and you can't just do the popular stuff because the math says you can't.
It's the ripple effect. This is going to affect this. This is going to affect comic stores. Right. This is going to affect this. I was talking to my buddy the other night when I was, coming home from work. Like, I wonder how what are Comic Cons going to look like 5 and 10 years from now?
Right.
It's going to affect everything.
And having worked through this, it's going to be miserable at working at DC Comics for the next, 3 months with everybody. It's going to be miserable working. It's going to be a tough environment to create comics in. And that you don't want that. It's like I already think the corporate environment makes it tough to create comics in, and this is going to make it tougher.
Now, that just reminded me of something. We usually, it's kind of an urban legend because I really don't see the evidence here that the comics division is kept around as some sort of R&D division, an idea laboratory.
I've always heard that about DC.
But it's us, the comic book people, saying it. I don't see people from outside acknowledging it.
Yeah, neither did I. I always heard about DC had an advantage. This is what we always heard at Marvel. Marvel, back before they were bought by Disney, always had to make its own money. That's why it was always so creative. DC, everyone always said DC was under Warner Brothers licensing and I forget the other licensing and finding new stuff. I can't even remember the word for it. Division, which I never saw any. I mean, how would anyone know that? But that's what they always said. That's why DC could make the same old stuff year after year, and Marvel had to be nimble and creative. And there was some truth to that. Marvel always was sort of more nimble and creative and responded to trends faster than DC. DC was always much more corporate, but I don't know if that was true 100%.
Things that I think it's a rumor to a certain extent, but things that made that rumor grow was when The Matrix came out and everybody was talking about The Invisibles by Grant Morrison.
R&D, research and development. That was the term I was looking for. DC was under, research and development, and they didn't have to make their own. They didn't have their own budget where they had to make their own money. I have no idea if that's true. That was just a story.
Well,
but that got repeated many.
Because remember that DC only had to wake up to Hollywood when Marvel was making all the Marvel movies, because DC were hiding out in the Warner corporate structure.
Yeah, right. But they always had movies made. Just Superman was huge. They were living off of that Superman movie for decades.
Yeah, and Marvel.
That was as long as they were making Superman and Batman.
The first Marvel movie was Howard the Duck. People really forget that.
I actually liked Howard the Duck when I first saw it. Not that I thought it was a good movie. I just thought they kind of. It was as good as a Howard the Duck movie as I thought was going to come out of Hollywood.
Leia Thomas. Let's be real now. Okay.
Thompson?
Oh, Leia Thompson. Yes.
She was cute.
I just said a real person's name at work. I can tell. But anyway.
You keep getting Steve Sakai and Leia. You keep getting real people's names mixed up with the comic.
After talking about the disaster of everything going on with DC, we can lighten the mood. If you go back and watch Ryan Reynolds, and I noticed this because I was watching the movie when Tim Robbins walked out in the Green Lantern movie by Ryan Reynolds. It's the same plot as Howard the Duck. Even the villain turning into Hector Hammond, the big head, matches the dude turning into the great big huge monster. Everything matches. It's the same movie.
I became a Ryan Reynolds fan with Two Guys, a Girl, and a Pizza Place. I still like that show. I don't know if you've ever seen that one.
Somebody showed me a movie called Waiting with him in it, and
that was after too. That was after his Two Guys, a Girl. I think Two Guys, a Girl, and Pizza Place ran like late '90s, early 2000s. Then he did a bunch of movies.
I stayed away from it, man. I was watching X-Files, brother.
If you ever want to see a decent sitcom, watch that one. It was him. Trailer Howard is her name, and I forget the other guy's name. And also Nathan Fillion came out of that show. He had a role in like the second or third season.
Well, guys, I'm kind of wondering if we want to speculate on how this is going to affect other comic book companies, but I don't. I mean, that's kind of. I don't think it's going to affect them. I just don't know how. If you can't sell, the direct market's going to die. There's no money there if they're going for profit.
I'm hoping not. If DC continues to be able to sell through the direct market, it'll be okay. It's not like it was heading up before this. That's the problem. It's not like comics were on a rocket ship going up before this happened.
I want to speculate for a minute. Here's what I hope happens. I hope there is somebody that comes in. Maybe it could be the person that you're rooting for, Marie, or something where somebody is able to kind of get a little foot in the door and be able to explain things to them the way they need to hear it. You follow me? Now,
I don't know if she can do that. I don't know.
It's man. That's
I don't know if anyone can. Yeah. No, what it is. It can't be. The problem is, we're back to Steve Jobs. That person can't be someone from below. That person has to be someone from above. We need a visionary from above, and those people are so rare. Because if you ever listen to Jordan Peterson speak about hierarchies, I find it and he actually has some interesting stuff about hierarchies and artists that are interesting. Well, one of the things he says is a hierarchy, which is basically any business, any pyramid-shaped structure, by their very nature, filter out the most creative people. Because what happens is everyone has to start at the bottom, unless you're a rich guy. Everyone has to start at the bottom doing the drone jobs. And that in and of itself filters out creative people who aren't drones. And as you go up, you have to toe the line. It's mostly the people who get promoted are the people who toe the line, keep their heads down, keep going up, and all the creative people leave, which is why companies get into trouble once they get so big, and some smaller, nimble company eats their lunch because they've got creative people. And I think that's the problem with DC right now is they don't have all the people who are up above. I don't think have the creativity to get these comics going up. That's the problem I see with both Marvel and DC. But they're not DC especially.
Now they're not going to get it. It's going to be like CrossGen. If you believe Mark Waid, when he worked at CrossGen, this guy built a freaking studio that was huge. It even had cot rooms for people to sleep in.
I liked CrossGen comics.
He wanted them to work like 9 to 5, and he would walk around where they were all working and tell people to redo things or get mad and send them home.
Right.
Wade was the one that was trying to tell him, "You let me run the floor. I'm the creative. You go up there." I think that's going to be gone. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be gone. And where's CrossGen at now, running things like that?
Right. I like I said, I know Marie will do her best.
Yeah.
But I just think it has to be to run one of these companies. You need a Stan Lee. You need a Paul Levitz even. You need a Jim Shooter even. Just somebody with personality, with a strong personality and vision to get at least something done.
But
the guys above you, they don't have that.
Here's the deal.
There's nobody in comics who can do that right now.
Well,
no, I don't think so.
That came out of. Okay, here's the deal with the comics, though, is that the business model that you've described to me that they do in there and stuff like that, that can't survive in today's world with all the liability issues, and it can't do it. Stan Lee's job, it was unique. He ended up like working for his uncle, and he kind of etched that job out through nepotism.
Well, what was to me, it's not just nepotism. What made it work is the extremely shallow corporate structure. All Stan Lee had to convince to get something done, was to convince Martin Goodman. So one of the reasons they were so creative in the 60s, besides the people involved, Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, whoever else, Wally Wood, whoever, besides the actual talent there, was to get a comic made. You just had to convince one guy, Martin Goodman. Now to get a comic made, how many guys do you have to convince? A whole lot.
That's what I mean. It's an outdated business model. I don't even like using the word business model. I know there's probably
it's not a business. It's the creative process isn't that it's not that it's out. It's the wrong business. It's the wrong model for creativity.
Yeah. Yeah.
You really should take the comics and cut them off into their own thing and let them run wild and just do whatever and then just license from them. And if they get too wild every now and then, you slap their wrists and go back to whatever.
I think this is a fair question to ask us. Answer me this one, guys. Would you invest in a new comic book shop? Why?
Well, I think comic shops are only doomed because the business model of making creative comics is bad.
The ripple effect. That's what I'm getting at.
Right.
That's my whole point that
no one was saying comic shops are doomed when X-Force was selling 1 million copies. No one was saying comic shops are doomed when people were coming in looking for Sandman issues and trades. No one was saying comic shops were doomed when the X-Men was selling 250,000 copies a month.
When you were saying they're not going to listen to Twitter, they're not going to listen to comic book shops. They're not franchised.
Well, it's not that they don't listen. It's that the structure they have to create comics in isn't creative. Doesn't matter. No one ever listened to fans. No one ever. I mean, first of all, you couldn't. But Chris Claremont never one day in his life listened to fans about what to do in the X-Men. That's not how creative people work.
That's one more thing that kind of burns people. If you go back and read those letter columns and stuff, the editors I have magazines where they're like, "Hey, we're taking that in, man. Thanks for the feedback."
Yeah,
they made the creators. Stan Lee made them think we were all in this together.
Yeah, they never did.
The editors pushed it to where, hey, we're talking back and forth to you. Thanks for the feedback. They made you.
And they made up those letters.
Yeah. It's like finding out Santa Claus wasn't eating your. It's like finding out your dad was the one eating the cookies, not Santa Claus. It's
right. Like I said, I always tell the story about my friend Thomas, who I worked with in the Marvel bullpen, and he started working the bullpen right out of college, about 22, and he stopped reading comics and got so disillusioned when he found out there was no master plan.
There you go. Yeah.
These writers had no master plan for the Marvel universe. There was no master plan for their stories. They were just writing it month.
I actually prefer that there's no master plan, because this whole writing for the trade thing, it's actually kind of ruining the story. You have issues where nothing happens. There's no action. The fact that they're trying to write on the fly, it increases the chaos in your brain, and you let that chaos go right to the text that you're writing.
Right. Yet now, like you said, the only master plan is stretch out the story to 6 issues. That's the extent of the master plan.
I just realized something. Mark Grunwald had the no prize because you would write in and fix their stories for free, and you got an envelope. And I want to answer Parker Rizzo's. No, I would not.
What has he got here?
Oh, I'm going to answer his question. No, I would not invest into a comic book shop.
No. But like I said, comic shops are doomed not because the model is bad, but because they can't sell comics.
Well, they're not going to have as many comics from DC to sell if they get
a problem too.
I just want to make that clear because of this. So when that comic book shop goes out and Marvel can't send their comics here, IDW can't send their comics there.
My comic, my LCS owner said at the beginning of this COVID, he wasn't sure if the comic shop was going to make it through the summer because there's just not enough comics to sell. And he runs the shop basically as a hobby because he's got a full-time job that he telecommutes to.
Well, I tell you what, my comic book shop online, I didn't want to call them out until you said that. That's where some of my questions are coming from. Sort of, it's one more thing that added to it. That's a better way to put it. They had in 19 years, I probably emailed them 30 times, or they've emailed me.
Right.
This is the first time they haven't responded to me. So that's what I'm trying to tell you. And this is that's what I'm trying to get
at.
There's
not enough comics for them to make rent.
I don't know what's going on.
That's going to be a problem if they want to sell only the popular comics.
Right. So that's what I'm trying to say. That's where I'm coming from, man. People want to yell Comicsgate, this, that, and everything like that. But here's we need to be looking at the future. Some of that stuff is, I think, that I'm not saying it played a part in any of it, but you've already got a whole bunch of burned people who aren't supporting comic book shops now or buying comics.
Once again, I'm not sure I'm not sure how many people who complain about comics were actually buying comics at the time.
That's bottom line.
Marvel and DC have both done so. I mean, the reason their circulations are so low isn't because they were making comics that people liked for this long. I mean, if they had been making comics that everybody thought were great, their circulations wouldn't be so low.
Well, let's say somebody came in.
A specific group of people don't like specific comics is a whole other thing. I don't think the alienation of one group of fans has made comics go any lower than. I think it's been the alienation. There's just a lot of fans who don't think the comics are worth their money. What reason they have for it, I don't think matters.
Paulo looks intense. What you got over there, Paulo? What do you...
No, I'm just thinking. I was thinking about one other part of the plan that says that they're going to they may treat publishing as part of licensing, so they will license out the characters to interested parties in publishing them, which
they've
might
been saying that
some of the
early 80s.
Yeah, but right now they might because if they're getting. Yeah, the thing is, if they want to keep publishing Superman and Batman, is somebody going to have to license the Metal Man?
Well, they can't stop publishing Wonder Woman.
They'll lose the rights.
If they stop publishing Wonder Woman, they lose the rights to Wonder Woman. So that's not going to happen.
And I tell you what, after what those covers I saw they put out for Wonder Woman 84, I kind of wish they would now. Those were awful.
Who cares? You weren't buying Wonder Woman.
If an outside publisher is coming to DC, I want to publish your comics, and they're only going to have to go through the library of the unwanted characters, they're not going to sell either.
Doing that. Who is it? Dynamite or who? Someone's publishing Marvel
IDW was doing a sort of children's line with the Marvel characters.
They're already licensing stuff out.
Yeah,
but I don't know.
But it's not the main It's not the main universe. And besides, some people say that IDW is going to license everything. IDW is not going to license anything because they've been losing money and overfest for the last 5 years, and they can't afford to license an entire universe of characters. So the shared universe might disappear in comics if they go with this one is going to do. Lucifer, and the other one is going to do not the New Teen Titans, but the Young Justice or whatever. If they license out a name or a group of characters, which is going to be tremendously hard for the contracts with the characters that they will have access to.
I can kind of see that.
But most publishers in the US don't have money to license the characters.
No, they don't.
Yeah. I don't want to be totally random here, but I want to be a little selfish here. But I saw when we messaged you, when you put out in the group messenger, they're bringing out Alan Moore's Twilight of the Gods. Mm-hmm. I want to hear about this because
what is that? I don't even know what that was.
Alan Moore years ago, he came up with this great big huge future of DC where you had like the House of Shazam, the House of L.
Okay.
I've read it. It's on the internet. I've read it 3 or 4 times on the
script. It's a
huge pitch, huge proposal.
It's a proposal.
Yeah, and they wouldn't go with it, but it started leaking out, and people were hearing about it before the internet. And then the internet came out, and it leaked once or twice, and people got to read the pitch. They're like, "Why didn't they do this?" Now, for them to be going back and mining this from Alan Moore, that's why before I have an opinion, I was like wanting to hear a little bit more about it, like how did this come about? Because
it's going to come out in they're canceling all the low-selling titles, but they're putting out this huge collection of stories which are unrelated to that Alan Moore treatment. They're sticking inside. But if they get it published, and the thing, a couple of the websites that used to have that treatment, they got a cease and desist letter from DC many years ago. So you can still find the document, but the websites that had published it, they got cease and desist letters, so they can't host it anymore.
Once again,
so if they put it out in a hardcover volume, it becomes copyrighted DC for sure this time.
Once again, I want to point out what who was that? Parker.
Yeah, Parker
Rizzo said earlier when he would consider the creatives an investment. The suits at DC Comics would rather own Watchmen than all the future works from Alan Moore. That's how little of an investment they thought he was. They wanted the sure, rather than keep Alan Moore happy and keep their word to him that he would get Watchmen back when it went out of print. They kept it in print and lost all future Alan Moore project. They could have had a dozen Watchmen from Alan Moore, but they thought so little of him as an intellectual investment that they didn't do that. And that's what comics are up against. And that's what I fear with these new people who, when they put licensing and an esports guy in charge, they don't understand comics. They don't. Nobody in charge of DC, I bet, thinks it was a mistake to not give Alan Moore Watchmen back. But have you ever heard anyone at DC say that was a mistake?
No.
Instead, everyone says, "Well, he signed the Well, that was the right. He signed it." No one said it was a mistake.
I don't think anybody has ever thought DC would think it was a mistake, to be honest with you. Like, I mean, seriously.
Nobody at DC would even think that was a mistake. That's my whole point. They wouldn't. Instead of having 10 more Alan Moore graphic novels, they got the one.
Yeah.
That's good enough for them. Yeehaw. Yeah. You could have that times 10.
Yeah, they did something that nobody had ever done before.
Right.
Keep a comic book in print beyond the original date of release. That had never happened. The Watchmen trade paperback is the first time that happened.
And all they had to do was, he would have licensed it right back from them.
Yeah. Everybody makes money.
He was already involved in some licensing. I've got the role-playing game over here. He helped co-write.
It's not like DC wouldn't. They would have first right of refusal to license the Watchmen. They would have had the Watchmen as a perennial bestseller. They would have had 6 other Alan Moore graphic novels as perennial bestsellers. But instead, they were like, no, we want to keep the Watchmen. We want to trick Alan. And we think so little of Alan Moore as an intellectual investment.
Getting worked up.
That we don't care.
Yeah, they reprinted a bunch of Alan Moore stuff in here from sorry, man. I get worked up about this. There's a role-playing game over here. I have it that DC had, and Alan Moore came in and did a source book, helped with a source book that actually ties into the Watchmen graphic novel. He was willing to play ball. And they would have made more money with Alan Moore. Yeah.
Parker, if you can get hired at DC and you can treat the creators like intellectual and like creative investments, I would love that. I would love that if anyone would think that at DC, but they don't. They don't think it at DC. They don't think it at Marvel.
Yeah. I'm going to have to start winding this down if that's all right with y'all. But is that okay? I mean,
if you got to go somewhere, you got to go.
I mean, I can keep it up, and you guys can keep going. I don't care a bit.
Well, I can show. I haven't showed the comics I got this week yet.
Well, all I'm going to kind of say is that, like, for decades, people have been saying that comic books are going to die, the floppies and stuff. You got to admit, this is the one time where you're alone.
I quoted John Romita this week on Facebook when he said back around 1993, when he said, "I've lived through the death of comics at least 4 times now." But we keep getting close.
I think, yeah. He's still going to
Jimbo. This is the color class. So it's the reprint color edition. Like I said, I'll bring us back to Walking Dead. I'm the sucker who would buy Walking Dead color reprints if they weren't $4 twice a month. I don't know who's going to buy that. Because I'm buying Usagi Yojimbo reprints. Then I'm really enjoying this series, Red Mother. This is, once again, it's a slice of life horror story. I'm a big fan of slice of life comics. And I'm not a big fan of horror comics, but I like good horror comics. So slice of life horror is, I've never quite seen the genres mashed up this way, because I don't know any horror fans who like slice of life stuff, but I'm really enjoying it.
I'm sitting here like, I know people like the horror stuff and the House of Mystery and the Bronze Age. A lot of people tend to go towards Bronze Age horror. They love it. Yeah.
And I picked up this Big Girls #1, which I put on my pull list. It's Jason Howard. It's this weird story about some plague that hits mankind and turns some men into these giant monsters who just destroy civilization. But for some reason, a few women are spared being turned into monsters, but get turned into giants. So now the women have to fight the giant monsters in these cities that are left. It's a weird premise. There's some mumbo jumbo for how it all happened, but it was a fun first issue. He's the guy who did Trees with Warren Ellis.
One of the rules about comic books is when you talk about the plots out loud and they just sound outlandish to you, and you have to look this way, like, well, you got to read it. That's usually a good comic. You know?
well, some people are really into sort of the explanations for how some things happen in comics. To me, it's all just mumbo jumbo. As soon as you get into time travel and origins, it's just mumbo jumbo. Get to the story. I kind of treat it all the same as like, oh, all this. They actually have like little scientific explanations for why people turn into giants. I'm like, whatever, mumbo jumbo.
Yeah.
And speaking of slice of life, a new Adrian Tomini, I don't know how to say his last name, and it's kind of a joke in here. He never tells you how to kind of say his last name. I think you pronounce the last E. So it'd be Tomini.
That's my nightmare. How's it feel to be me, huh? How's it feel to me?
This is straight up slice of life stuff. I don't know if you ever read Optic Nerve, but it's him and his life and him writing comic books and not being Neil Gaiman. It was some stories from the 90s and I'm up to the 2000s. And they made it look sort of like a sketchbook. Some people like the grid on the sketchbook. So there's even a grid here there's even a sketchbook. Where is it? Elastic thing. This is what they have on fancy sketchbooks now. They have elastic things that hold. There's one of those. There's a bookmark thing. But I really enjoy his work, Optic Nerve, and now what is this? The Loneliness of the Long Distance Cartoonist. But know something funny about this? These book design parts here are actually stickers. So like this little art is a sticker. This little blurb is a sticker. This little back thing is a sticker. And the UPC thing was a sticker. I'm so used to peeling off like the UPC thing they stick on the back of books a lot that I peeled this one off, and like there's an indentation there that's part of the book design. I'm like, oh, I wasn't supposed to peel that off. That's part of the book design. Oh well.
CGC 1.0.
It's worthless now.
It's not in mint condition because I peeled the UPC off.
Awesome.
And what was the highlighted comment you just had?
I thought you were done. Mind the Comics, heavy theme, but still a lighthearted show. You guys are all in a great mood.
Yeah, well, you can't be the too doom and gloom. Though I'm worried about DC Comics. There's nothing I can do about it.
Well, the other thing is like, let's face it. I mean, this was emotional news, no matter how you cut it, for different reasons with everybody. You probably knew, like you said. I think you knew some of the people, or knew. Or,
I heard all my friends who I knew from the '90s in comics were all, of course, oh boy, here we go again. I hope everybody's okay. Hope everybody lands on their feet.
Right.
That sort of thing.
Yeah, there's been a little time to do the news, and I've done the thing where I've read news right away and shot a video and been like, "Oops, nah."
Yeah.
No.
And I know any plan you hear is no plan at all. Like I said, any first of all, as they say, what was it? No plan survives the battle. And that's especially true of comics. Like I said, if you're coming out of esports, if you're coming out of children's regular publishing, if you're coming out of licensing, and you think your plan is going to survive, you don't know comics. Your plan is not going to survive the battle. So I know their plan. There'll be a lot of plans. They'll be whipping through plans in these first few months.
Well, I will say, after talking to you, I think I need to rephrase what I was thinking. Like, you can get a bit rich here. I think AT&T or whoever is, the high up, whoever the highest person up is involved with this stuff, they may not have a plan, but they definitely have a vision. And I think they're going to keep pushing until they get that vision.
Oh, they're going to be looking at the final tally of money and go, this isn't going up. That'll be their plan. How come this isn't going up? This should be going up. We got to pay down that debt with it. This is going down. Or if it's going up, they'll be going, oh, this is going up. Good job. That's AT&T's plan.
Yeah.
And if it keeps going down, they're going to go, we don't know what they're going to do. We just don't. I have no idea how those big wigs at AT&T think. I have no idea how a global communications company thinks about a comic book company. I have no clue.
Man.
And I think if they think at all about it, it's going to be bad.
I think so. Paulo, you got any thoughts there? That's here at the, if you had one final thing to say about it, what would it be?
He's thinking.
No. Oh, he's thinking. Oh, he froze up on me for a minute. I was like, oh no.
No, I think he's just thinking. He's thinking of that final thought, if he's got a final plan. Yeah, everybody has a plan if they get punched in the face, right? And I think it was General Patton who said the plan never survives the battle. If it wasn't General Patton, it was General Patton quoting some ancient general.
Patton was a big reader. That's how he defeated his enemies. He read their books on strategy and stuff.
And I know if you're coming out of esports, your plan isn't going to survive the battle. It's not. Like I said, the only one I have faith in, I know Marie is going to get the books out.
Are you back?
That I know is going to happen.
I think so.
Okay. Yeah.
What was that?
I missed a couple 20 seconds or so.
There we go.
Oh, we were just asking if you had any final thoughts.
Yeah, any final thoughts?
If you had any idea, any predictions, any final thoughts, any hopes or dreams?
Yeah. I think we're going to lose the corporate characters in the coming years, and it's going to be quick and painless, or it's going to be quick. I'm not sure if it's going to be painless, but we're not going to like the outcome. So yeah, the U.S. comics industry needs to reinvent itself, and I actually don't know exactly how they're going to do it.
Yeah, I don't know if they can. That's the problem.
Yeah, because even we readers, we're too much creatures of habit, and
right.
As a group.
But that's okay. I mean, I think the creatures of habit thing, I mean, it's worked in the past. That the fact that you can get an X-Men book out every month is a good thing for X-Men fans. You got to make it a book they want.
until they make Shia LaBeouf, the new Wolverine. So, I think Mind the Comics has put it really well. Dr. Silver Age and I talked on Facebook a little bit in some comments about we grew up at a cool time. And as you go on down the way here, he ends this with, if not, we still have a bunch of old history to go through.
Yeah.
We got those back issues, and I'm saying, rack up on them.
I think the comic shops are still our best ways to get new fans and new comics made. All this Indiegogo and the other one stuff. It's fine. It's fine for established comic pros, but it's no way for anyone to break into the industry for a new guy to break in.
And I think the shop owners need to become a lot more proactive.
Yeah, I don't know if they have it in them. Yeah, I don't know if they have it in them.
But I don't know if they have to be, or they would lie.
They're going to have to evolve and adapt.
I think they're going to die. Is how it'll. If they have to be proactive, they're going to die. I think that's the problem.
They're all going to turn into head shops and get old trades of Robert Crumb. That's my prediction. We're going to have,
I think the comic shop model also doesn't work because, I think it works in general. It works as long as there's good comics coming out every month that fans like.
I'm glad you said that, Jerry. I really am. It's got to be quality.
I think the problem is creators have not been put in a good position to create good comics. And also a problem is people, and the reason comic shops are failing too is I have friends who never go to a comic shop anymore. And on occasion they do go to the comic shop. It's because they heard something in the news about comics and they want to buy it. But of course, that's not how comic shops work. It's sold out by then. Comic shops have to order things 3 months in advance. Mm-hmm. So by the time it's in the news, and I'm like, this is how and people who know this is how comic shops work still go in that day looking to buy it. And I'm like, and they're complaining like, I went in looking to buy that new Superman that was in the news and it was not there. And I'm like, that.
Yeah, and then some comic shops make it worse because you show up the day of to get a book, like the Red Goblin in Spider-Man a couple years ago. I saw it with my own eyes. And they're like, well, this book came out. We got it on the shelf 3 hours ago, but it's fluctuated on eBay. So it's not 30.
Most good comic shops know to sell to their regular customers or one to a customer for the old stuff.
I'm sure and glad I've been collecting for the last 50 years because the library in my basement will always be there for me to enjoy this medium. I've always held that the hobby is going to survive anything as long because of the back issues, a hobby, not business.
Yeah. I mean,
we're going to die off one day.
We all still have our stuff, but there's plenty of us who want new stuff. So I would like the new stuff to continue, but if it doesn't, what do I do? What do you do?
Well, I want to take total advantage of my dream now. My big positive dream now is they go more to trades, and I finally get an affordable copy of the complete Fantastic Four by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby cheap.
Cheap. You can get one cheap these days. I mean, they're not that expensive.
All I can find is the omnibus and stuff. People are holding on to that right now.
Okay, is it out of print? Because once those go out of print, they rise up in price. But the omnibuses are actually cheap when you think about how many issues you get. It's like $2 an issue.
$100.
It's not.
I mean, what was I going to say? Over 103 issues, not $100. 103 issues and an annuals or a couple annuals.
Yeah, that's really. When you think you can get an omnibus for $100 that's got 50 issues in it.
Yeah.
Even at full retail, that's I pay more than that for a new comic. So it's kind of like, to me, they're not that expensive. It's a lot of money to lay out at once, of course. But when you think about how much it is per issue, it's not that much.
Part of the fun is getting the deal, or do you want the convenience of just having it, man?
Yeah, you like getting a deal. That's what it is with you.
The hunt's part of the thrill. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not. It's not a hunt. It's gathering. I say that I say that all the time when I hear, I like to be on the hunt for comics. I'm like, you're not hunting. You're gathering.
Yeah, it's gathering after I take out that vulture on it. Yeah.
Hunting is a lot more. There's a lot
I
different.
go through the books and see which catches my eye, and sometimes it's not the obvious stuff.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Because I'm still looking for something nice to read.
That FM mag or graphic novel FM that you showed that grabbed my eye hard, man. Something like that.
I gotta find the Spanish copy for you. You know that there are people in the United States paying like $30 for a Israeli issue of Amazing Spider-Man number 300.
Are you kidding me?
No.
Wow.
That's Spider-Man 300.
I know they were. Do you know there's a whole run of Spider-Man comics in Mexico where Gwen Stacy didn't die? Yeah. That came out a couple years ago.
Yeah, these are the guys who collect foreign editions, and they try to build up runs, but the majority of those guys are trying to do sets. So they try to find comics in every country possible where that comic has been a certain comic has been reprinted, preferably using the original cover. Which is funny because sometimes some licensors they use that cover on a completely unrelated comic, or they make up a cover, and they like the Silver Age Indonesian covers because they're completely wacko.
Okay, I used to say that I've known people who just collect Supergirl comics. I mean, those adventure comics in the 70s and all that stuff, and that's all they collect is Supergirl stuff. You have now taught the weirdest people in the world that I know.
Yeah, but there's a Facebook group, Comic Foreign Collecting. They even have a podcast. They started turning their podcast into YouTube videos. There are 8 of them, and one of the guys in there is part of the CBSI YouTube channel.
Right.
Well.
I would say collectors need something to collect.
Yeah. I'm going to pull back my weird remark and just say that maybe I'm being petty because apparently I don't have my pulse on comics of today that's out there collecting.
No, you don't. Even though I only maybe get one new series a week and 3 or 4 comics a week on my pull list, I still as the one of the 3 of us who loves going to the comic shop every week, I hope there's still a comic shop to go to, 5 years from now.
Well, I can already tell the ripple effect's hitting. I'm going to be getting on the internet looking up these Israeli comic books, and next week I'm going to probably be on here being like, they're great. They're awesome. I take it all back.
Speaking of Supergirl, is that one Supergirl cover still inexplicably expensive? It was an Adam Hughes cover. I remember I saw it on YouTube all the time.
Supergirl, the Superheroes variant cover where she's sitting on the meter.
Yeah.
I really haven't looked up a lot of that stuff since before the pandemic hit.
I haven't seen it in a few years, but it was a Legion of, it was like issue 26 or something.
Somebody.
Superheroes, and it was Supergirl by Adam Hughes sitting on a rock or something
in space. Yeah, number 26 or something.
A $200 cover, and everyone who got it was like, "I have no idea why this is a $200 cover." And I remember someone on YouTube even got they got the Italian version of it because they found it for $20.
There was a few. Like I said, I've watched fewer and fewer. 10 years of watching comic book hauls and stuff. Kind of,
right.
There's just. But one of the things that kind of tipped me over the edge is that very book. I saw 2-3 videos within a month where they were like, "I found this in the dollar box."
Right, and they were so thrilled to have it because it was a $200 comic.
They bought it for $200.
Okay,
they're trying to get clout on eBay. Oh, I found it in a dollar box. 3 people in a month.
See, I'm a sucker. I always believe people. I'm like, why would you lie about that? I don't know.
Oh, I don't really question it. It's when the third person popped up. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
I don't know which one's a lie, but somebody is.
I don't think anyone said the videos I saw. I don't think anyone found it in the dollar box. They found it for $20 or $30, and they're always like, and every one of them was like, I have no idea why this comic is worth so much money. No one has any explanation for why that particular comic was worth. And it's the only one I ever saw that people would show off and say that. It's like, because like, oh, this is a 1 in 300. That's why, that's what. But that one was always like, it was like a 1 in 25 or something.
The power of YouTube. We're the ones that make Commander worth money.
Jared, I think I found I now completely agree with you with the notion that the slabs are craft projects, because I found the most craft project of slabs.
Let's keep going, guys. Let me make a phone call and y'all keep talking.
Okay.
Because the Collecting Chaos got a slab Muppet Babies #1.
Nobody could possibly want that.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the Muppet? There's a Muppet Baby issues everybody chases because it's got like the Marvel 25th or 35th anniversary cover with the border with all the faces on it.
Yeah, because they did that for all the Star Comics issues.
Right.
It was kind of ridiculous.
That's like the one Muppet Babies comic I ever see, because everybody who buys I can't remember if it was the 25th or 35th. It was in the 80s, so it must.
86 was the 25th anniversary.
So it must be the 25th anniversary ones that they that everybody chases down.
Let me check the GCD. Where are you?
Check
number
comment.
10.
Muppet Babies number 10. The Mastodon tells us. I need my glasses for these. Dr. Silveridge says, I hope comic shops can weather the storm. Yeah, because I still get that childhood thrill when I see a wall of new comics that just came out. I hope that I go to the comic shop every week. I still buy new comics every week, even though it's not as much fun as it used to be during COVID because I can't stay and hang out with my friend. But when I still love going to the comic shop, it's a social occasion for me too.
I actually miss buying comics at the newsstand because there were newsstands that had all the special editions, and then there were newsstands that maybe they usually didn't get the Marvel and DCs, but sometimes they had a Marvel, and I would want to buy that one just because it was in a stand that usually didn't have superheroes.
See, I was a new, the first comic shop opened near me when I was 15, but I didn't start going regularly to my friend Rob, who was the one I still meet at the comic shop every week. He turned 16 and got his license before me. He was born in March, so probably sometime after he turned 16, maybe that summer, we started going on Saturdays regularly to the comic shop. So after that, I didn't go to the newsstand too often. Mm-hmm. And I love it. I mean, I pull this me as an indie guy. Even then, I loved, whatever indies I could get. The comics shop was great because there was all these comics I couldn't get on the newsstands.
Yeah, we started getting comic shops around the early 90s, but the comic shops were made specifically to sell comics imported from the United States. The comics that we had here, they didn't sell because we could buy them anywhere.
Right, that was the boom years. And was it... Parker Rizzo says, guys, how about the Ultimate 4-out-4 variant for $9K plus? Oh, that's the first Miles Morales that's going crazy right about now. Mm-hmm. Like the regular one is going for like $400. I remember when people were buying that up for $40 going, ooh, this might become valuable. And I was like, yeah, right, sure, it'll become valuable. Now it's going for like $400. I'm like, whoa, shows you what I know about comic book speculation. The mess. I bought all my comics as a kid at Kmart and Ames. First comic shop was about 6 months before it closed in 1999. I can remember when I went. I used to go. My childhood vacations in the 70s were camping, and there was an Ames near where we were camping. It was a department store, and that's where I used to get. Like in the summer, I used to get the 3-packs from Ames, the Whitman 3-pack. I used to love those. They were the greatest thing.
I grab Whitmans when I see them, though. I checked before I got on here. I checked to see on my phone how many people were watching. I'm like, oh, 17. All right. I saw another live stream of Comic Book Guys. I felt bad they had 9. I was like, oh. Then I scrolled a little bit more, and 7.9 thousand people are watching somebody make a primitive roundhouse out in the woods. I'm like, damn.
Now that it's been here 2 hours is when people are starting to pop in. Typical Howler Mouse stream.
Yeah. This COVID stuff. I'm in the office all week thinking about I'll piffle in the afternoon. So on the weekends, I try to get something going. There's a comic book convention next week, and I don't know if I'm going or not. And there's all this stuff. Everybody's starting to get juiced up to try to find somewhere to go buy comics. And then, Saturday pops up. My butt's at home. My two. I'm like, what did I even?
Well, I'm sitting here playing with this metal 10-sided die. I just made a video of an opening of a box of dice I bought. No one's ever gonna watch. The same 20 people who watch my videos will watch that. Paolo watched it. That's about it. No one's going to be watching that video. But I made it.
I left another comment when you said you weren't a gamer, you were a dicer. I left a comment saying, "Well, good thing you don't collect Ginzu knives.
Yeah,
then you'd be a slicer."
I still have my pouch of dice from 1989, my friend.
Well, yes. I have a whole tub full of dice that I bought over the years, and I keep Dungeons and Dragons, and I keep it next to my chair back there that I watch TV in, and I constantly pick up the dice and make color patterns out of them in my hand as I'm watching TV. It's like one of the things I do.
Hey guys, I don't want to put anybody on the spot here. Sleep Reader popped in. We want to pop him on here since if he wants to get on. You want to
invite Sleepy Reader? Sure.
Let him say yes or no there. Get the link if somebody knows how to send it to him. I don't know. I think
he's on. You have to send it to him on Twitter.
Yeah.
But
anyway, since we're now we're just like hanging out here. This was $5 at Walmart. It was an impulse buy because it has this character called Dritz. And people will kill me because right when I quit Dungeons and Dragons, because everybody graduated, went to military, got married or whatever, and I was the kid of the group. Apparently, this character took off in the novels in the late 80s or something, and I've totally missed it. So I got a little figurine of Dritz in one of his books to see what this Dro elf is all about. But one of the good things that's coming out is I reclaimed a little bit of my childhood in a way. I feel like this figure of Destro that they're putting out, I think these are, I don't know, they look like they're like 7 or 8 inches. It's like they grew with me. It's like when I put it in my hand, it's the same size as the Destro from when I was a kid was. You know what I mean? But there's some retro toys coming out, man. It seems like every 10 years, the 80 toys hit again in some new form or fashion. They're kind of always there in some form, but they always go back to that stuff.
All right. I'm going to direct message Sleepy Reader this link. All right.
How did your dice video go? Because I can let you put these on there.
I just show. I ordered some dice, like a mystery bag of dice from some random site that advertised on YouTube. What was the name of them? Skull Dice, something like that. And just because I like buying some dice, and I got them in the mail today, and just like showed off my. Want to see my big bin of dice?
Well, I'm kind of nervous now because one dropped on the floor and I rolled a 6, and I'm hoping that's good for whatever happens next.
These are just my 6-sided dice.
Wait a minute. Not only do you have all sorts of dice, but you have them separated by.
Yeah, I got 6-sided dice, and I got. These are the dice these are Dungeon Dice, which was a game, TSR. And these are all the like Dungeons and Dragons type dice.
Sleepy Reader is on the West Coast. Nice. Sleepy Reader's on the West Coast, so apparently it's dinner time at his house. So
okay.
It's not like we put him on the spot. It's not like we put him on the spot.
That's all right.
Enjoy
we don't think
dinner.
less of him for not coming on.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I'm trying to look around here.
We got some.
I don't think I have anything really new.
Now I want to know what he's making for dinner. You can't say you're making dinner and then tell us what. Not what. I mean, that's like basic courtesy. I had ice cream and a banana for dinner. That's been my COVID dinner so many times.
Well, I tell you what, man. There's actually books I want to get now that apparently, for some reason or other, apparently they're being delayed. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Last Ronin, and that's where we go into the future. And there's one turtle left. He's got all the other turtles. He's got all the weapons from all the turtles. And you don't know which one he is. So the big break on that one is back when they were doing the San Diego Comic-Con a few weeks ago online, where you could go, see everybody's video. Was it Peter Laird? Is that the guy who's on it now?
Yeah, anyway, Laird is the.
Yeah. Is he? Yeah, I know. Eastman and Laird are the same person to me. I know that's horrible. But because for decades I saw Eastman and Laird, but it was Peter Laird, I'm pretty sure. But he dropped the bomb that the artist changed on the book, and I don't know if it was his wife or who it was. She completely flipped out, like, "You just dropped the bomb. Nobody's supposed to know that yet." And he's just smiling, like, "Well, they know now." So sometimes it's kind of cool to get these creators on YouTube and see if they slip up a little bit. Get the inside scoop before it hits and stuff, but I think it's been delayed again or something. I don't know what's happened to it.
So basically, one of the turtles is Superman from the JLA Avengers crossover. All the weapons: Captain America's shield, Thor's hammer.
I want to say that this is a leftover plot from the 80s. So it happened before that, sir. I don't know.
But really, what isn't a mess leftover plot from the 80s? Oh, Sleepy's making pizza. All right.
That means there'll be beer.
When is there not at his house?
My drinking, my drinking doesn't change. We've got like 15 little mason jars of moonshine there we got in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, of different flavors. And then the wife loves it. She's like, but I'm getting to where I want like dark ales and stuff and everything like that. It's where I'm getting to where I can't drink beer when I do drink, So yeah, I
just drink water. So
yeah, all right.
Never anything but water in my bottle. So any questions we have to address? Oh, what Gore Vidal is here? Has he raised any issues as he usually does? Let's see.
Where's he at? I'm not seeing him.
I just saw him say "Holla, Sleepy."
Muppet Babies number 10. What was this about? What did I miss? What is this?
We were talking about which was the 25th anniversary Marvel cover that everybody collects. The one Muppet Babies you always see on YouTube. That was it. Muppet Babies 10.
Because I mentioned that the Collecting Chaos got a slabbed Muppet Babies number 1. He showed it on his channel.
I just bought a number 3, but if you go my Instagram a week or two ago, I went through every issue that I have. I'm just missing Ewoks and Care Bears. I got the Muppet one for $10 with another Masters of the Universe Hordak cover. Like I went in, but nobody was looking. The Muppet Babies number 1 CGC slab will become more of a craft project after he gets some autographs on it. Some Muppet Baby autographs. Let me tell you something about the Muppets, man. Okay, they're sacred. Okay.
Gore Vidal says, "Good day, everyone. Speaking of deals, I was about to secure over 100 BPRD single issues for cheap. I began reading them yesterday. Wonderful stories." Oh, okay. That's everyone says that's the best. That's the best of the Hellboy stuff.
Which one?
BPRD.
Oh yeah, it's fun stuff. I've got one or two trades over there. War of the Frogs was the one that brought me in. That was that they pulled from a Hellboy story where he was like, "Ma'am, you have frogs," and I think that was the first quotable quote out of Hellboy in the early days. Is where he turns to look at the woman and says, "Ma'am, you have frogs." My childhood friend John was the unofficial comic book vendor in our school because he was the only one who went to the city every week. Oh, wait, I traded a 5 Nutty Bars for an Avengers West Coast #1. You know what? I think it's worth 10. Okay, 10 Nutty Bars. You got a deal there.
I've never heard of Nutty Bars, but if you want to see what is the a former Marvel editor in the 90s, Jason Liebig, his name is spelled Liebig. Now is into being a candy historian. So if you go to I think his Instagram channel is like collecting candy, and he puts all out and he collects all these old candy wrappers, and he scans them in and archives them all, and he talks to all the old designers who used to work at the candy companies, and has been writing down the history of all these candy bars and candy bar designs and stuff.
Look,
so does he have the most racist candy wrapper of all?
I don't know. He's got a lot of candy wrappers.
It's from Spain. We also had it in Portugal, but it's original from Spain, and it's a brand of chocolate-covered peanuts called Conguitos, and it's racist.
Okay.
And then they redesigned it in the late 90s, and it's still racist.
Oh no, it's so wrong to be laughing at this.
But that's an interesting little thing. Like the Nutty Bars reminded me of this. If you ever want to do some candy historian stuff, candy history stuff, look up Jason Liebig and collecting candy on Instagram.
Mind the Comics other YouTube communities even worse. Pipe smoking. That's
And I never got the chance to become a regular cigar smoker.
I got friends.
I finally found some cigars that I like, but I usually don't have I usually can't buy them because they don't even sell them here. They're from Italy. They're Toscanellos, and you have to break them in half, and you only smoke half because they're really strong and dark. They're dark. They have concentrated tobacco, and they're really strong. But they have a great smell.
If you want to make that old joke and ask me if I have Prince Albert in a can, I do.
All right, guys.
That was a joke. My friend Bunch and I, when we were sitting around the bullpen, we used every now and then one of us would just look over at the other and say, "Hey, Bunch, you got some Prince Albert in the can over there?" And he'd go, "Why, yes, as a matter of fact, I do." Of course, I'd go, "Well, you better let him out." That's why I have this Prince Albert in the can. For those who don't know, Prince Albert is smoking tobacco, and that's like the oldest joke in the world.
Well, guys, I think we run out of steam on the comic book stuff, so I say we kind of.
You don't like my Prince Albert in the can references? Is that what you're saying? Holy cow! Yeah.
No, I'm just sitting here watching the view count die down. I don't want anybody's feelings hurt.
That is your own fault for watching the view count. That's something I never do. I assume nobody's watching us. That is always my assumption.
Yeah. We come here, we talk for 2 hours, and nobody else cares.
That's actually part of my psychological makeup. You know how there's people who think somebody's always watching them, or there are people who get shy in public because they think people are watching them. I never think anyone's watching me. I don't know why. Even though I'm out, I know I'm noticeable. Right. It doesn't penetrate my brain.
I've got
a video. Nobody's watching me.
I've got a video from 2013 where I got a comment on it today, and it's nothing but me. It was a video that I did spontaneously. I was just sitting in my kitchen waiting for somebody to show up, and they were late. So I looked around. I'm like, "Where the hell are they?" So I turned around and I saw my Thunderbird toys. I have the movie Thunderbird toys from the 2004 Thunderbird movie. After the whole point is after over 18,000 views on it, 7 years later, somebody was like, "Will you please take those toys out of the package?" 7 years later, I showed my wife, and she was like, "You look like a baby in it." And I'm like, she thought it was from 2004.
You never know. Like the videos I do, like my taking a look videos on popular stuff, like the artist's editions or something, they usually get views long after I've forgotten about them. And occasionally someone will pop up and insult me about one of them.
Yeah, I get that.
I'd just be like, oh, we'll delete this one. I'd be pissed off like 4 years after I put it up. I'm like, goddamn bastard. Oh,
I love people who are either new to YouTube or never really did a lot of digging on it, because they'll find my series of videos where we would all meet like this, and we would all watch the same movie at the same time and do commentary. This was a thing. There were big YouTube channels that do as well. You know, they've come and gone, and people are so pissed because they think they're coming on here thinking they're going to see heavy metal. That's the big one.
Right.
Heavy metal for free, and they're like, "What the fuck is this? Cussing me?" You know? Yeah. I'm like, this is from 4 years ago, dude. You know,
you don't know what a watch party is, you fool.
Yeah, it was a thing for about a year and a half on YouTube, man. You know, but
and sometimes I think it's like Russian bots that insult me. I mean, I don't get too much, you know, insulting, but sometimes you're just like, that person doesn't even speak English, and I don't think that they're human with whatever crazy insult they come up with.
Well, I mean, I seriously really don't worry about like views on these videos, right? But but what happens is I play detective. I want to know why one gets big, why this video got big. There's no rhyme or reason to the videos I have. My Morlock Massacre one is big. My Amalgam Comics got big, and I'm like on a potato of a camera with no microphone, and that one just keeps
and it doesn't get you subscriptions either.
Oh, yeah.
I found that out with my my MTV at Marvel video, where I digitized the old video when MTV came into Marvel in like 1992, and did a little segment from that, and I digitized that, and you know, one of the comics, a bunch of the comic sites linked to it, so it like got 10 or 15,000 views, and my subscriber numbers didn't go up by one. It was just like, all right.
But I found out some dude over in England and some guy in the Middle East, and there was people that had these websites, and they were linking my video up to a few of them. You can get in your analytics, and it used to tell you it was on a website where the source was. And I couldn't get over that. I was like a minor celebrity in like some neighborhood. You know,
right? You never know. Like just this week, guy left a comment. He's like, "Hey, love your passion from a fan in France." I'm like, "Oh, cool! Someone in France watched it. What are the odds of that?"
Yeah, I think it was a guy named Terry Cooper had a vlog in England, and he would take my video and then write a whole blog on his opinion and be like, "And Hallermouse backs me up," and I'm like,
"Okay, I'm a source."
But he was pretty cool. He was real supportive, but it just kind of blows my, like I said, you get that viral video or whatever you want to say, call it, a lot of views on a video, and you're just like, why this one?
That's like, I can remember one time with my blog. I write a blog every week on radiantcomics.com, and I write about art, comics, whatever I feel like writing about. And there was one time I was using a quote that I learned in art class. I think it was Clement Greenberg. More blue is bluer than less blue. And then a few years later, I was like, "Oh, I want to make sure I got that quote right." So I looked it up on the internet again to see if I got the quote right, and I was now the main source for the quote. And I'm like, how could that be?
Yesterday I found that when I got home and I was putting up laundry, it fell out of the closet. I found the print off of where I was quoted by Entertainment Weekly, but they wouldn't identify me. Yeah, I was like, "That's me," and they never. So I printed it off so when I tell the story, I can be like, "This was me," you know. Yeah, but they wouldn't give me credit, so people would come to my YouTube channel. Yeah, so.
People are weird.
Yeah. All right, guys, it's almost 8:30. I really do.
All right.
And it's been a pleasure. It was a great show, I think. There at the beginning, man. I think there was a lot of. I had a good time. Is what I'm getting at. Yeah.
I just want to read this one sleepy reader. I used to get comments I used to get comments from people who expect me to go through the whole comic on screen so they can read it on YouTube. Yeah. People are weird.
I think I did that on 2 videos and it wasn't planned. It just kind of happened and nobody appreciated it. But there was a dude who would, oh my God, I can't believe, I don't want to give his real name out. I can't remember his YouTube name, but he lives in Florida. And last time I called him, there was a hurricane. I was calling to check on him, but he's got a whole YouTube channel where he would take the comic book and have it like turn the page by itself and have certain panels so you can read them. So they're out there.
Did you get that on your TV? And that's how I discovered Adam Strange in like the late 70s. DC did a TV show. It was only on like local cable. I remember it being on. I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember back when they had like local channels that had like, it was just like a
public access
camera pointed at dials. It had like the barometric pressure dial and the weather. It was like if you wanted to see the weather, you'd turn to some local cable channel. This is like in 1978, and there'd be dials on it where you could see it.
We didn't have that.
I didn't find out years later. You can find this on IMDb now. It was the early years of Nickelodeon, which I didn't know existed then.
Yeah.
In like 1978 or 79. And they would point a camera at a comic book. I remember it being Sugar and Spike and the 60s Adam Strange. And they'd read you a panel, and they'd move it over, and they'd read you a panel, and they'd move it down, and they'd read you a panel. And that was the show. It was like called the Comic Book TV Show. It was like in the late 70s, early 80s, maybe. I'll have to look it up for next time. Finally.
The first show I can recall, and again, I could pop up later and be wrong, but the first show I remember seeing anything to do with comic books was the first year of the Sci-Fi Channel, which I wish they would bring it back the way it was. And it was called Prisoners of Gravity. And they did this whole thing. The first episode I saw, I'm pretty sure they were talking to Alan Moore or Frank Miller. And what the dude did is that he found footage of them getting interviewed on some other show, and he would have a camera on him, act like he's answering the question, and then it would cut to them in a park somewhere, and then it would come back and he's acting like he was talking to him from space or something. But it's called, I'm positive it's called Prisoners of Gravity. I bet there's episodes on YouTube somewhere. Now that we have 9 people here, 9 people will find it now.
Woohoo!
All right, guys, let's wind it down.
Yep.
Had a great time. Thanks for everybody that was in there. And hey, you guys that lasted this long all the way through, thanks a lot, man. That's awesome.
We'll give you a prize. We'll give away prizes one week.
Yeah, we'll give the Mark Grunwald no prize is what we'll do.
Yeah. Jared, we can give them one of your dices.
There we go. I got some extras.
Right there in front of me, man. It was so obvious. Damn. All right, later, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye, Miss American Pie.